Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for being here tonight for this live dad reset. Right? You were never meant to lead alone, and it's for dads who want calm, confidence, and real community or real brotherhood. My name is Drew Sol, and I'm the director for Dad Central and the founder of Connected Dads. And I just want to acknowledge that you got a lot going on, and the fact that you're choosing to spend your time here means how much you actually care about your fatherhood role. And I just want to acknowledge that. Thank you so much for choosing to do that. Ultimately, the goal here over the next 50 to 60 minutes is to add a lot of value to you. I want to help you understand what's going to help your fatherhood be as successful as you want it to be. And so I'd also love to get some interaction. I know it's going to feel very one way for me, but seeing that chat going is actually going to be really helpful for me. So if you can, go ahead, get started in the chat. Just tell me where you're joining from. Always love to get a sense of where people are and how far we can connect over the miles, we'll say, since this is the virtual medium. So I will also be asking you to use the chat throughout. It's also where you can ask any questions as I go throughout. So if something comes up while I'm talking, please put your question in there. Just so you know, I will have a dedicated Q&A at the end as well. But if I can, I'll try to get to questions throughout. You can also use the chat to comment with others or provide any feedback. That would be great as well. Let me just get the chat up here so I can see where people are tuning in from. So, anyways, as always, of course, in the chat, please keep it respectful, understanding, and focused on adding value to each other. And so, other thing that I think I'll just say is that coming to a fatherhood workshop might not feel like the most comfortable thing for you, and I just want to commend you for taking that step. Like I said at the beginning, it demonstrates how much your fatherhood means to you. And I want to ensure that this experience adds value, or as like my co-host Ed Gao Jr. likes to say, want to make sure this is a safe space, but also a brave space. So I'd love to again get a sense of your comments using the chat. And Derek, awesome, great to see you. Uh, Antoine, awesome. Oakville in the GTA, great to see you. Anyone else, go ahead, put your stuff in the chat. But also in the chat, I'd love to hear what's the best part of being a dad. I'm gonna wait for that to populate. Greetings to you too, Ed. Aaron, you're very welcome. Hey, Percy, great to see you. I think my chat might be a little bit delayed, but as I said, best part about being a dad. Nice. Watching from Louisville, Kentucky. Taylor, awesome. So best part about being dad, and often dads will say, a variation of something like this. I love seeing my kids grow and develop, or I love seeing when they hit a new milestone or something to that effect. And that to me, I love this, Antoine. Hugs for my son. Honestly, I think about my son too, and I don't think that there's much that feels better than that. It's pretty amazing. The other thing I can say is my twin daughters. When my first daughter, the oldest twin by 6 minutes, when she was probably like 2.5, 3 months, like the first time she smiled, I don't know that I can recreate that feeling about how powerful it was and how cool just seeing her smile back at me. But anyways, yeah, Aaron, I'd say I like the bedtime routine so far. I'm not sure how old your kids are, Aaron, but that's amazing because bedtime routine for many dads, myself included sometimes, has not always been the most peaceful experience. So that's fantastic. Yeah, best part for me is seeing my son smile whenever he sees me when getting home from work. Man, is there a better feeling than that? That's amazing, Derek. Thanks so much. Taylor, my 2-year-old daughter kissed me on the cheek for the first time. I melted. Daughters, eh? I've got 4 of them. Some of them are older. My youngest, though, she's 2, and I'm gonna talk briefly about myself a little bit, but anyways, that's awesome, guys. Thanks so much. Love the engagement, and on the flip side, quick question, What's the hardest part about being a dad? Now, again, answers often vary. My answer to this has, I think, remained the same over the years. So I'll talk about it while I'm waiting for people to throw something into the chat. And it's been maybe what we'll talk about today is it's been having to grow and change to make sure that I'm being the best for my children. That's really hard. That's what's been a challenge for me for sure. And of course, I've been at it maybe longer than some of you guys who've got younger kids. Um, but that's definitely been something that I've found to be the most challenging for me over the years. So, anyways, while you guys are popping in chat, I want to keep going because I want to make sure I don't get caught too long. But I just want to say thank you. I am going to share briefly about me. We're going to go through 3 resets to help dads become the calm, confident, connected leaders they want to be. And finally, I'll share more about our relaunched father leader community, which is called Dad Mentor. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I got some slides here. Pop those up. But before we get to anything practical tonight, before we talk about structure or community or leadership, I really want to tell you why this matters so much to me. And the reason it matters so much to me is because when I was 3 years old, my biological father abducted me. And that began a 4-year ordeal for my mom and turned me into a missing child, as you can see here on this very real poster of me when I was 3. This was the early 1980s. There were no Amber Alerts. There were no missing person databases and very few laws around parental abduction. When my mom went to the police, they told her, "Your son's with his father. There's nothing we can do." But, she didn't stop looking. For more than 4 years, she searched, had help along the way, ultimately, help of a lawyer and a police constable in St. Louis, Missouri. And so during that time, I actually lived in New York City. I lived in Kingston, Jamaica. Ironic, I live in Kingston, Ontario now, and St. Louis, Missouri. And we were constantly moving. I remember bits and pieces from these years, but mostly I remember feeling like an emptiness, wondering where my mom was, if she would ever find me. Then one night that all changed. Police burst into the apartment where we were staying. Within minutes, I was being told to grab a few clothes and get into a police car. I was taken to a foster home, pretty confused, pretty scared, and once again surrounded by strangers. So 2 days later, I was brought to a courthouse. I spent most of the day playing with toys until someone finally said, "Hey, come with us." They opened a door, and there before me was my mom. This is a woman I barely recognized, but I really spent 4 years refusing. She spent 4 years refusing to give up on me. Within 12 hours, we were on a plane back to Toronto. I was 7, and that was really the beginning of the rest of my life. So the reason I share that story is because, well, a couple of reasons. But first is family division can leave deep marks. Many of us carry pain connected to our fathers, to our parents, or to broken relationships. And so that's true, but I also know something else is true. Healing is possible. When I was 10, my mom remarried a man named Jim. For more than 30 years, he's really loved me like his own son. I'd also say my mom's faith and resilience built a great foundation for our family, and Jim showed me what steady fatherhood looks like. Things like patience, compassion, consistency. But I also had mentors, coaches, and leaders who stepped into my life and modeled what strong present men look like. And through all that, one truth also became very clear to me is that children long to know their fathers and to be known by them. And that's really the belief that I hold. And that's why I do the work I do today. I want to help dads grow, I want to help them heal, and I want to help them lead their families with confidence because it's absolutely true that when fathers grow, the children thrive. Because if you look at my story, I really shouldn't be standing here as a father to 5, helping other dads. But I guess the reason I share my story is also I want you to know that I'm proof that growth is possible. And so that commitment has really shaped everything I've done since. It's why I spent nearly 2 decades working in leadership and development. So I'm a Maxwell certified coach. That's why I became, why I've had the privilege of working with, I'd say, hundreds and impacting thousands of dads through Dad Central. But it's not because I have all the answers. It's because I'm committed to asking the right questions, right? And as I said, I'm a dad to 5. I still get tired. I'm not sure if you can tell how tired I am in this picture. I still get it wrong. I still have to apologize sometimes, but I am deeply committed to becoming a father leader in my home. And this picture, it's for my birthday last year. It's our blended family. It's not perfect. We have challenges, but we're working towards healthier and a more fulfilled version of family. And it's really because what I've learned along the way that's helped us get there. And that's what I'm going to share with you tonight. So I think that I might know something about you already if you're here. And I think you wouldn't be here tonight if you didn't care like I did. You wouldn't be here if you were, I'd say, casual about fatherhood. I guess you're here because you want to lead your family well. Maybe you even want things like you want to be calm, you want it calm instead of having chaos. You want connection instead of distance. And I hope you're not experiencing that. But if you are, you can get connection. And then ultimately confidence instead of doubt. I want you to know that I am genuinely honored that you give me your time tonight. So the goal is if you walk away with one practical shift, just sort of one mindset that helps you along the way, or one tool that helps you lead your family the way you want to, then I think this time will have been worth it. And so I think it'll be worth it because it matters to your kids or because of what it means for your kids. Tonight's about growth, it's about ownership, and it's about not leading alone. So let's go ahead and get started. You know, I want to start with something that I've observed. And bear with me, sorry, I have a little bit of a cold, so I might take a pause to grab some tea. I've observed after working with thousands of dads over the years at Dad Central, the dads who struggle the most are not the careless ones. They're the ones who actually are the opposite. They care a lot. They're the ones saying, I'm stretched thin, I'm exhausted, I'm not sure I'm doing a good job. That comes up a lot. Or I just want more time with my kids. And the other one is I need someone to say me too. I'm not sure if any of those things sound familiar. Let's see. I think I have them on a slide here. No, I don't have them on a slide, but I'm going to read them again. But um, I'd love for you to just type a "me too" in the chat if you've said any of those things in your fatherhood journey. You've said things like "I feel overloaded," or "I feel stretched," or "I feel tired." Right? Any of those? Just go ahead and type a "me" in the chat at any point in your fatherhood journey. Louis or Lewis, yes, me too. I'm not the only one. Antoine, me too. Derek, me too. Kerwin, me, yes, absolutely, gentlemen. Yeah. Taylor, me. Okay, I'm not alone. It's good to know. It's good to know. The reality is, guys, I see you and I completely understand. Right? Yeah. Chris, absolutely. Nathan, me too. Also, I feel guilty for not being able to handle things. Welcome to the club, Nathan. Yeah, I get that, but there are ways through that. Absolutely. And as Ed and I talked about on the one of the recent podcasts, guilt is actually a good sign. It's when it gets into shame that it gets really challenging. So hopefully, if it's just guilt, we know you're working on that. So guys, I just want you to know I see you, and I hear these types of comments from a lot of dads. And what I like to remind you when I have the chance is that you're not failing. Like, this stuff is challenging. Fatherhood is challenging, and there may be seasons where you feel this more than you want to, but the reality is that you are not failing. You're just simply overloaded. And so, um, this is really what the real problem is, right? And most overloaded dads are really trying to do it alone, except for you guys because you're here. And so, why do dads often miss this point? Well, I think it's because there's a little bit of a bigger cultural problem. The reality is that modern fatherhood has changed dramatically. Today dads are kind of expected to provide financially, be emotionally available, share the domestic responsibilities, navigate co-parenting or blended family systems, stay physically and mentally strong, be present and patient. The list goes on, all of that at one time. And so in the chat, on a scale of 1 to 10, how overloaded might you feel right now? 10 is absolutely overloaded. 1 is like, hey, it's a breeze. I got this. No problem. Go ahead, throw that in the chat. All right. I got a 9, an 8, a 5. Nice. Okay. Another 8. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There's quite a few sevens, eight. Well, no sevens, eights and nines. It's pretty significant. Another eight, six, seven. Yeah, that's that's on the top end of the scale. Uh, and so this is really the gap. We raised expectations for fathers without raising support systems for fathers. That's a big cultural challenge. Research from the American Psychological Association shows that nearly 40% of fathers report high levels of stress related to parenting, and many say they lack emotional support. Even I think what's even more concerning is that studies show fathers are significantly less likely than mothers to seek social emotional support, even when they need it. And this might sound controversial for some, but it's absolutely true. Is That's not real strength. That's actually isolation. And isolation is where stress compounds and it turns into burnout. Burnout becomes anger, resentment, bitterness. And ultimately, that usually leads to, I'll say, destructive choices for ourselves or destructive choices for our relationships, or maybe even destructive moments that lead to more destructive moments. And that leads to regret. So the problem isn't that dads are lacking discipline or they're lacking information or that they lack, the love of their family. Problem is that dads really were never meant to lead and to take on these extra loads on their own. And so I'm curious as if you can go ahead and put it in the prompt, if you can answer this. What would change if you didn't have to figure fatherhood out alone? This might require a little thought, so that's why I'll patiently wait for some comments to come in. Yeah, Luis, what would change if you didn't have to figure fatherhood out alone? You just think about that. Kerwin says less stressful. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's a good one. Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I appreciate that. It would be more predictable and less stressful, Antoine. Yeah, that's pretty important. Or a better marriage, less pressure to figure it all out. Means less stress, means being better able to be there for my family. Yeah, less pressure. I mean, those to me all sound tremendously valuable. Yeah, I would hope to be more informed. I always tend to take comfort in being more aware of the situation I am trying to navigate. Okay, that's great. Yeah, more informed, I think, is helpful, right? Knowledge. They like to say knowledge is power. Absolutely. Yeah, and if you've got a tip, an insight, something from somebody who's ahead of you or who's gone through what you're experiencing, they can clearly say, in hindsight, here's what I learned. Yeah, that's a great point. Absolutely. So, anyways, those are all pretty positive outcomes, right? And so, I want to take that great insight you guys shared and I want to talk about what makes strong leadership, especially when you consider every other area of life. And I don't think anyone would argue with some of these facts. Like strong leaders all have received some form of coaching, mentorship, peer accountability, or some community that's helped them achieve more than they thought possible on their own. And the reality is I'm going to share a brief story. I've been watching Man in the Arena lately. I'm not sure if you guys have seen it. If you've seen it, just type a yes in the chat. Um, and obviously, I am a bit of a football fan, and so this has been really interesting to me. But what stood out the most is as you watch how it's set up. It's Tom Brady, but then there's usually like one, two, or sometimes three other names at the opening of each episode. And so what's going on is that you actually begin to see that, Tom's success is actually a culmination of all these different people who have played integral parts in different phases of his career and even in his life. And so it's really not about only him, it's about the people who've been around him and the impact that he, as well as his teammates, had on holding each other accountable and challenging each other to achieve lofty goals. This to me is what I'm taking away the most from having just watched the show. And I think I didn't know that much about Tom Brady other than, everyone knows the rings and even some of the things that are in the tabloids. But this was really, that's the biggest takeaway that I've seen in watching this show. But there's other examples, right? I'll use some that might be more familiar. Luke Skywalker had his Yoda. You know, this is one I've learned about Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. Bill Gates credits Warren Buffett with really being a huge mentor to him. And then, of course, if you're again more to the sports, Phil Jackson, amazing coach. He coached both Michael Jordan, but also Kobe Bryant, two of the greatest players who ever played the game. But what about at home? We just kind of expect men or dads to figure it out quietly. The reality is that's just not sustainable. So I want to ask a question in terms of like, what if the solution isn't doing more, as dads? What if the solution is joining the right environment? It's getting a team around you that can support you when you need it, resources that teach you skills, knowledge that improves your capacity, both at home, but also at work as leaders everywhere. What if you were surrounded by an environment that you're not the only one navigating this stress and maybe specific co-parenting stress? You're not the only one losing your cool and feeling guilty about it, as you guys have talked about. You're not the only one trying to balance work, faith, marriage, and kids. What if leadership at home wasn't about control, but it's about connection, calm, and consistency? And so I want to go back to that man in the arena example. In one of the shows, Tom Brady tells his story about how he and Bill Belichick would meet every Tuesday. And those were one-on-one sessions where Tom and Bill would go over the offense or the defense or whatever, whoever they were playing, as well as what their game plan and what the strengths and skills. And he described how much he learned from Bill in those meetings and how much it improved his overall capacity. That was a growth focused environment. And really, that's the opportunity. Not be better, but become a thought leader inside a community that walks with you. And so let's assume for a minute you agree that you weren't meant to lead alone. You need the right environment. You need the right man. You need the right support. That sounds great. But here's the next honest question. So why doesn't growth stick? Right. So for Tom Brady's growth and performance, there are many other, I'll say first round, second, third round picks, all higher than him, that fizzle out and they don't make it. Why? I think we're talking specifically about fathers. What most dads are already doing is that maybe you're listening to podcasts or attending events like this. You've read a book, you've watched a YouTube video, you've tried some techniques, you've even told yourself this week is going to be a good week this week. Or this was funny. Back in 2017, we did a survey at Dad Central. And like one of the top responses in terms of how dads figure out fatherhood was, oh, we just wing it and hope it all works out. Um, Honest, right? Honest, but maybe true for a lot of dads. Excuse me. And so maybe that works for a few days or months, but then life hits and you're right back where you started, not because you don't care, but because care without structure often creates frustration. So in the chat, be honest. How many of you have listened to a podcast, read a book, tried something for a week when it comes to your fatherhood, and then maybe stopped? Just put tried in the chat. Tried, tried. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and I can say that has also been me too at times. So I've been there myself. Some doesn't usually feel all that good, but I want to give us a little bit of an illustration. Imagine a guy joins a gym. A guy joins a gym. He's not helping my throat or my pronunciation. Maybe we ask this question. Let's say a guy joins a gym. He shows up once, does some random exercises, watches a few videos, he leaves, comes back a week later, tries something different, leaves again. Does he care? Yeah, he probably does, but maybe he hasn't fully committed. Will he get results? Probably not. Let's flip this around though. So imagine he has a coach, a dedicated program made for his specific goals, a weekly check in and a training session, plus other men training beside him. Same effort, different environment. My guess is he's going to have a very different result. That's truly the difference. It's not that he has more motivation, it's that structure. And behavioral research backs this up. You know, studies show, man, my throat's really bugging me. Sorry, guys. Studies show that accountability and peer support increase follow through rates by up to 65 to 95% compared to solo effort. I mean, that's massive. Uh, Quick story. When I was at grad school, I met a guy, Clive. He wanted to train to be a bodybuilder. I had no interest in being a bodybuilder at all. But he's like, Drew, you want to come work out with me? I was like, sure. He's like, okay, we're working out 5 days a week, 6 a.m. at the gym. Whew, man, I'll tell you what, those are some of the best workouts. And I got in the best shape of my life just because Clive was dedicated and committed. And he would literally show up at my house at 6 a.m. and we would go. Now, I just started this year. I met a good friend of mine at the gym. I said, hey, do you mind if we work out just once a week? And that's now morphed from once a week into like twice a week, sometimes three times a week, because the workouts are just that good. And so, that's what happens when you work together and have accountability. So I'm just curious, have you ever grown faster because someone was walking with you? Just type a yes or a no into the chat. Derek said yes. Yes. Taylor, yes. All right. Yeah, and Tom Brady would probably say the exact same thing. My high school coach, Mr. Craigie, was an amazing support for me. He pushed me to be into leadership before I think I was even ready, but he believed in me. Having somebody beside me made a big difference, even at that young of age. And so the reality is that most dads really do try to improve in isolation. One dad in our survey said, excuse me, parenting classes overwhelm me. Another said, I just want clear guidance without overwhelm. Another one said, I'm tired of guessing. You know, that's really the real frustration, I'd say. That not that these dads lack the desire, it's that they lack dedicated fatherhood resources and support. And that's what Dad Central has always been about. And the truth is that growth requires resources and support, which brings us to the next reset. To be successful as a father, you need to build structure and systems, right? Structure and systems, because when the right environment is then supported by a clear structure and systems, something really powerful happens. Why does structure matter? James Clear, if you've ever read his book, Atomic Habits, he's got a fantastic quote. And I'd really just, once since I heard it, I was like, man, this is so true, especially when I reflect on my life. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. I reflect, and that is definitely true for me in my life. Most dads don't have a fatherhood system. We have sometimes vague or even a little more clear intentions. But intentions don't build leadership. Consistency in a system does. And consistency grows fastest, usually in community. I mentioned a few minutes ago that research study that uh, accountability and peer support increases follow through by up to 65 to 95%. That simply means the men grow faster together. And so instead of random advice, isolated effort, internal pressure, imagine this. You've got a clear pathway, a weekly rhythm, men walking the same journey beside you, and small practical steps to fit your real life. Yeah, that's where transformation happens, not in intensity, but in consistency. I lean on sports a lot. So if you're not a sports person, it could apply for the arts, it could apply for any other thing where you're committed. But I remember being a student athlete and our coach would talk about grow. What if we just all got 1% better each day? How much better would we be collectively by the end of the season? And that consistency and that focus of what's just the 1% that I need to get better today. One, it was very doable, but two, it really put things in perspective. How can we actually collectively improve? And ultimately, our team was one of the most successful teams. And so, fatherhood, let's focus there. Hey, Drew, that's what you're probably saying. Excuse me. Having a cold and a sore throat, not the best for a presentation, but it's live. We got to go. So, there are three leadership pathways, we'll say, acknowledging that every dad season is different. That's why the father leader community that we have is structured around three guided, you could call them tracks: rebuilding leaders. This is for dads navigating separation, court stress, co parenting conflict, blended families, step families. An emerging leader for newer expecting dads who want confidence and clarity, or for overwhelmed dads trying to restore balance and patience. I gotta mute for a second. Okay, let's see if I can get back. So in the chat, if you're a dad navigating separation, co-parenting, course stress, just type in rebuilding. If you're a newish dad, like your kids are probably under the age of 4, type emerging. If you're just kind of feeling overall stressed and trying to restore some calm, go ahead and type steady in the chat. And as you're doing that, I want to reiterate that these are not support groups. They're dedicated leadership development inside this idea of fatherhood. And so when structure meets community, something powerful happens. You stop reacting and instead start responding. You stop guessing and instead you gain clarity. You stop carrying alone and instead you gain strength. That's really the transformation as depicted in this picture. You get what this slide's showing: a father who couldn't handle things before, and instead a father who's making the most of the time he has with his family. When I worked as a career coach, Smith School of Business, I supported MBA students. We had a great associate director of the program who used to tell his students a simple analogy about an orange. He would say, the MBA is like an orange, and the juice is worth the squeeze. It would come up at every challenging point in the program. Some students want to check out, others would fully embrace the message he was sharing. To get the most out of their experience, they needed to invest in their experience, even in the difficult moments. Essentially, he was saying that they would get out what they put in. And that's really where I'm going next. And I want you to know that so far, what we've talked about is structure. We've talked about accountability, talked about guided pathways, and maybe something you're thinking is, okay, Drew, I can get behind some of this stuff. It makes sense because, well, truthfully, it does. Structure works, community accelerates growth, accountability increases follow through by up to 65 to 95%. But here's what I learned the hard way: none of that matters unless a man decides to take ownership. Getting off the mute for a second. I'm going to go back to another personal experience. One of the hardest seasons of my life. It's when my separation happened. Everything felt extremely unstable. I ended up going on stress leave. I had extremely limited access to my kids. My routines were gone, but I had to build new ones. And most importantly, my identity really felt shaken. But actually, worse, it was completely under attack. And there were days where I thought, if I can just fix everything around me, I'll feel better. But the reality was, I couldn't control my ex. I couldn't control the court process. I couldn't control what others said or did. I couldn't control how everything unfolded. What I could control was me. Right? I could control my reactions or my feelings. I could control my emotional regulation. I could control my daily discipline. And I could control my willingness to do the right thing for my kids, no matter how hard it was. And in that process, as excruciatingly painful as it was, I realized something powerful. Community supports you. I had amazing people around me that I could reach out to, that I could connect with. Some I had to pay because I knew I needed that support, but others were, thankfully in my network already. I also learned that the structure really guides you. And ownership at the end of the day is what will bring the greatest sense of transformation. So the turning point wasn't when my circumstances changed, because it took almost 4 years in the family court process, and there's still some things that I have to deal with now. But the turning point was when I stopped asking, why is this happening to me? Which I asked a lot, and started asking, who do I need to become in and through this? That's when leadership actually began, because leadership isn't control. There's only what I can control, which is me, and all that outside of my control. Leadership is really self regulation under pressure. And I was under intense pressure. And I think that's where most men feel, oh yeah, this was my picture of that were connected to that separation story. These are my three kids, my ex-wife before just before separation happened. So it's a bittersweet picture. I mean, they're so cute there, and I love that time with them, but it was just before those things happened. Um, yeah. So leadership is self-regulation under pressure. And that's where most men, I'd say, feel resistance. The quiet voice that says, if I slow down, everything falls apart. Or if I ask for help, I'm weak. If I stop caring at all, who will? Or maybe there's something else that comes up for you. It could be something completely different. But I definitely felt that voice. Maybe you have too. So if in the chat, which of those thoughts have you experienced recently? Just type a one, two, or a three. Or I think four, because like four is like a fill in the blank, right? Four means you've had some other negative thoughts. And just in the interest of time, I'm going to keep going, but please go ahead. One, two, three, or four in terms of those thoughts. Which of those have you experienced? And so when I was in the hardest season of fatherhood, I would say number three to myself a lot. I would be like, man, if I stop carrying all this, like who's going to carry it? And so I felt like there were no outlets for the struggle I experienced. Instead of self regulation, I was actually suppressing. Another term for this is called maladaptive coping. Pushing through without self regulation is considered an unhealthy coping strategy because although it helps you in the short term, it keeps emotions stuck in the body and mind, which can lead to stress, burnout, or physical symptoms. So, if you're still here and you take nothing else from this session today, I want you to hear this. Find ways to create healthy outlets for your emotions. Learn to actually regulate your emotions. All right. That's the most powerful thing I've taken away. And so the moment you choose to take ownership, not perfection, not control, not suppression like I was, but ownership, everything shifts. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Because the lead your family needs starts with how you lead yourself. So research in emotional intelligence consistently shows that a parent's emotional regulation directly affects your children's emotional outcomes. When you regulate, kids feel safer, conflict decreases, connection increases. And this is family systems science. It's defined, it's clear. And so ownership doesn't mean doing everything. Ownership means leading yourself first, taking responsibility for your actions, creating clarity where there's chaos, and choosing calm when stress arises. Excuse me. You don't lose authority when you grow. Actually, you gain. You gain huge influence. So Andy Stanley, I love this quote. I've used it for years. Said, "Every CEO is eventually replaced, but no one can replace you as dad." The reality is that influence we have is permanent. The question is, what kind of leader do you want your kids to remember? So go ahead, close your eyes if you're comfortable for 10 seconds. And I want you to envision the answer to this question. What kind of leader do you want your kids to remember? Okay. If you've been able to picture something, just type one word in the chat. It could be calm, present, strong, patient, consistent. For me, the word Ed, my co host, wouldn't be surprised by this, is connected. That's my word, connected. Kerwin, strong. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Supportive. Yes. Thank you, Derek. Definitely. These are all great words. Yeah. So ultimately, you do have a choice, right? In future one, You can have the same stresses, the same isolation, same guilt. Future two, there could be calm confidence, brotherhood, clear direction, kids who trust you. I'm going to ask this question, but you don't need to respond. Just think about it. Which future are you drifting toward right now? And I say the word drift on purpose because we all know that growth doesn't happen automatically. So let's sit in that question again. What kind of leader will your kids remember? As I started doing this fatherhood work, one thing kept coming up. Dads cared, they wanted to grow, but no one had actually invited them to explore their fatherhood. They were trying to do this alone, and as we talked, a lot of it was based on ineffective parenting methods. I started bringing dads together. This is how Connected Dad started. We brought dads together to have honest conversations about fatherhood. Something really powerful happened. When dads sat in the room together and said, "Me too," like we did earlier, this is my favorite part. Like the pressure kind of dropped, right? When you hear another dad, you hear another dad express something like, "Man, I can totally relate to that," or how another dad handled conflict. Like all of a sudden you got some clarity, or you got some like, oh, some peace. When they shared wins and setbacks openly, confidence began to grow. That was really, I'd say, the turning point. Not because anyone suddenly became perfect, but because we could all relate to the other's struggles and didn't feel completely isolated anymore. I think the most valuable part of connecting with other dads was really hearing their stories. And and again, another realization. This is really deeply important that leadership is personal, but growth is really relational. And behavioral research backs this up. Long-term change is dramatically more sustainable when men are connected to consistent peer accountability and structured environments. Environment ultimately sustains what motivation cannot. And that's why future two, calm confidence, clear direction, kids who trust you, doesn't happen by accident. It happens when a man chooses ownership and then places himself in an environment that supports it. So the real question becomes, if you're serious about becoming the father leader your family needs, what environment are you choosing? Because no man, no dad builds leadership alone. And that's really what I want to show you next. So, this is why Dad Mentor even exists. You know, this isn't a course though, although we do have a full course endorsed by Dr. Greg Fabiano within the community. He's a fatherhood expert. We created the course, he endorsed it. It's not another checklist, even though we have a lot of simple, easy to implement checklists, guides, and resources to help you in every single season of fatherhood. But Dad Central has been creating resources for dads over 20 years. We have some of the most trusted resources for both dads and professionals. But most importantly, what I want you to know is this is a community for men who are ready to lead differently. Inside Dad Mentor, our father leader community, you get weekly live dad huddles, which are facilitated by leadership coaches. The reason? So you can get support, acceptance, and clear guidance. We've got guided leadership pathways, so you're not guessing at what will work and what to do next. We got practical tools for communication, boundaries, and emotional regulation, so you don't lose your cool when stress hits. We have, most importantly, maybe not most, but accountability without shame. So growth feels like you're gaining strength, not heavy and burdened. Finally, it's a private network of dads who understand your season. So you're surrounded by men walking the same road. It gives you a simple structure, real conversation, and small daily steps. What does it mean for you? It means that you don't have to guess anymore. It means you don't have to carry it alone and you don't have to keep running on fumes. It means you become calmer under pressure, more confident in your decisions, more connected to your kids, clearer in your leadership at home. And, this is where I want to share. You've been listening to me for a while, but maybe a few other voices. Here's what some of the other dads who've been part of Dad Mentor have said. Jeremy, he found Dad Mentor in the midst of the most challenging season, after a separation and going through family court and some of those other situations. It was really tough. But this is what he said. The impact it's had for him. He says, I can't imagine my journey without Dad Mentor. Sherwin's not on this, but Sherwin was one of our founding members. He's like, I've grown calmer, more confident, more present. Jordan, fatherhood finally felt simple and clear. And Dr. Fabiano, this gives dads a structure and community that they've been missing. So let's talk about the investment because everything we've talked about tonight, calm under pressure, clear leadership, community, emotional regulation, consistency, it all has value. Excuse me. But before I give you that information, I want you to think about something. What does it cost to keep running on fumes, to keep snapping and apologizing, to keep feeling like you're behind, to keep carrying it alone? Because I think this is really important. The cost of inaction isn't zero, it's it's stress, it's distance, it's regret, it's years that ultimately you don't get back. And so we know this to be true because Dr. John Olive, he's the Canada Research Chair in men's health promotion. He's worked with us and he shared some of his study on intimate partner relationships. And excuse me, one of the crucial findings is that men don't usually take action until things get to crisis levels. Hear that again. Pause for a second. Men don't usually take action until things get to crisis levels. Might there be something you're missing that needs your attention now? That's why we do this, is why we talk about, because I don't want men to get into that situation where it's almost too late. And so now contrast that stress, regret, or growing distance with this: a structured leadership environment, a weekly live huddle, guided pathways, accountability, real conversations. Again, to me, this is like one of the most valuable things, like real, right? No pretend, like no glossed up, no Instagram life, like the real practical tools you can use immediately in a community of men walking beside you. If you've hired a leadership coach privately, you'd invest thousands per year. If you joined a professional mastermind, you'd pay hundreds per month. If you attended a men's retreat, you'd spend more in a weekend than this costs in a year. But this isn't priced like a private coaching program. It's priced to be accessible because I want consistency to win. So there's the investment. The 5 year community is only $37 per month. Or if you choose the annual option, it's $370 for the entire year. That's 2 months free when you commit annually. If we break that down, that's $37 per month. That's about $9 per week, just over $1 per day. Less than most men spend on a coffee in a day. The coffee I got this morning cost me $2.25. So, if I do that over the month, that's costing me a lot more. But the difference is this: coffee gives you temporary energy, whereas Dad Mentor builds long-term leadership. And here's something else. When a man invests financially, he shows up different. Behavioral economics shows that paid commitments dramatically increase follow through compared to free programs. Why? Because investment creates what we talked about before: ownership. And ownership is what drives growth. So this isn't about buying content, of which Dad Central has a mountain of content. It's about stepping into an environment that strengthens you. And here's what I do know: if this community helps you regulate instead of react, speak calmly instead of sharply, show up present instead of distracted, or build trust instead of tension, what is that worth over the next year, 5 years, 10 years, over your child's lifetime? $37 a month is not the real investment. The real investment is deciding, I'm not leading alone anymore. And if you want to go all in, the annual option locks in the best value and signals long term commitment to your growth. This, I think, is really accessible. It's clearly structured and it's powerful. And it's really here for the man who's ready to lead intentionally. Now, if this is something that interests you, that you'd like to learn more about, or even just jump in today, I've got an option here. Give me one second. I can find where you can just scan this QR code right here. It'll take you right to the Dad Mentor page where you can jump in and join us in the community. So, as I wrap up tonight, I just want to thank you for joining me, for caring about your fatherhood role and choosing to invest in yourself. You are already ahead of most because you've made that commitment. You are the father leaders that make a difference in our world. Now, there is one final reminder I want to leave you with. Leadership drifts downward without structure and intention, but ultimately, it rises with community and accountability. So after tonight, you've got three options. Enrollment for the Father Leader Community closes on March 8th. If you're ready to stop leading alone, restore calm and clarity, and build the kind of legacy your kids will remember, then this is really your next step. Let me get back to the chat. And I'd be honored, completely honored, if you chose to join us. And if nothing else, you can take what you learned tonight and start with just one of the resets that we shared. Or, you could do this. You could just simply do nothing. But I don't believe that you'd be here if you didn't want to grow as a dad. So thank you for joining me. I'm happy to answer any questions I didn't get to or that you want to put into the chat. I'm going to stick around to answer as many as I can. So, fire away, put them in the chat. I also have some common questions that may come up. So I'll wait to see what comes in the chat. I'm going to end this. Just me. I apologize again for the sore throat and the sniffles. That's not ideal, but you're still here. Whatever questions you have, go ahead, fire away. Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome, guys. My pleasure. Real honor. Thank you guys for joining me. So I'll just start with some of the questions. So some questions Dad's asked, like, what if I can't attend live every week? That's not a problem at all. In fact, they are recorded and they're held in the platform. Again, only for those who have access, if you wanted to. But it's available every week. No big deal. It's like a live feed as well. So any updates or any comments or any things that follow up from it, it's all there and available. So no big deal. You can't attend. Guess what? Almost every week there's an opportunity. Next question that could be asked is, what if I've tried communities before? If you have, then I'm glad. That means you know the power, hopefully, of a vibrant, connected community. And that's our goal here, is to continue to drive that. So, I got a question here. Okay. That's a great question. So the question is, how do you build the discipline to be consistent with your routine? Such a good question. And back to, I'm going to talk about my early foray in building connected dads. I created a 4 A's system. So the four A's are this. Give me one second. First one, awareness. Second one is alignment. Third one is activation. And the fourth one is accountability. So this is my answer to your question. How do you build that? One, you build awareness. Where do I need more support or help in terms of discipline? Do I need discipline in my finances, in my budgeting? Do I need discipline and it's in these fundamental areas. Do I need discipline in my communication and my communication skills? Do I need discipline in just, managing my daily routine? Awareness starts it. Step 2, alignment. Once you become aware of where you need discipline and what's off, you begin realigning. So this is where priorities come in. Priorities as well as your daily schedule. So then you make adjustments to that structure or system that create better alignment. Then this is really where your mind comes in. Activation is about the thoughts that you think. If you're thinking thoughts that I am undisciplined, I really struggle with my discipline, I wish somebody would help me with my discipline, you're already in a losing mindset. You need to shift your thoughts to say, my system and structures will help me improve become more disciplined. Or you'll be like, I'm becoming the disciplined father I've always wanted to be. These are the types of thoughts that creates activation. Your thoughts were going to drive your feelings, and your feelings are going to drive your actions. And then finally, accountability. You need someone outside of yourself or you need an accountability system. Back to the James Clear quote, you don't fall to the level of your goals, or you don't rise to the level of goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And so that accountability structure could be your own check-in that you establish with somebody else outside of you, or this weekly structure that we have in our weekly meetups. We have a very simple meeting structure. We come in, what's a win you've had as a dad over the past week? How did you do on your accountability? Not punitive, but just, hey, share with us. Okay. Then we get into open conversation. And finally, we decide what's the one action I'm going to take this week. And then guess what? You got to check back in next week. So that's an example, and that answers your question. Great question, though. Okay. Great question. Any others? Taylor, thanks so much. That's really, I appreciate that kindness. Okay. So another question is, what if I'm going through court right now? Well, I think that this is one of the most vital resources you could find to help you through a difficult time. When I was going through my separation, I mentioned I have a great community, and of course, court is just it's well, I won't go there. The fact is, you need support, and so you have. When I was going through separation, I could not imagine what it would be like to not have the support of others around me to be able to make it through. So if you're in court, I think this is like one of the most valuable, low cost, because everything else is hugely expensive. Your lawyer fees, crazy. I don't even want to talk about the amount of money I had to spend just to fight through court for almost 4 years. Ridiculous. Nothing. It was completely worth it. My kids are what mattered the most, and there was no amount of money that would prevent me from fighting for them and what they needed. But that's my answer to that. I'm not sure this question. Okay, another question here. How do you how do you identify, put it up there so other people can see. How do you identify what to focus on first when it comes to tackling being overwhelmed and trying to find balance? Good question. I'm not sure if you've heard any of our podcasts from the month of February, but there should be something I can draw upon to share with you to answer that question. And so, how do you identify what to focus on first? So, I would say, what is causing the greatest amount of stress, anxiety, angst, overwhelm, right? What is that? And whatever that is there something you can do to get help or support with that area? And that help might be a friend, it could be your spouse, it could be your boss, it could be somebody who has some form of knowledge, influence, excuse me, or support that they can provide you in the area that you're most feeling burdened by right now. And so it really does start with self reflection. Not too many people want to do that. Everyone wants to take action. Self reflection is actually one of the most valuable things you can do to identify, where am I feeling? And even thinking about identifying stress in your body. Most of us don't slow down enough to actually just stop, take a few deep breaths, close our eyes, and say, where am I feeling tension right now in my body? Right? That in itself, that creating that awareness is going to then give you the insight, the information you need to be able to then say, well, what's the action I can take? So I would say, how do you identify? Well, you've got to stop. You got to pause. You got to reflect. And you got to get time with evaluating what you're experiencing physically, mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually. Okay. I hope that answers that question for you. But that to me is, I think, what's really important. Again, great question, Taylor. So important. Awesome. Thanks, Taylor. I'm glad that you're getting value out of the podcast. That's fantastic news. Another question people might have is, what if I'm not sure which pathway I fit? The reality is those pathways are there and available, but it's not the community is really what helps support you. And you can in and out, grab the resource, whatever is relevant. The pathway is not crucial, right? We have resources for dads at every age and stage. We've got new dads all the way up to, you can say, granddads, right? Because grandfathers, and depending on their family structure, they could have kids again at home with them, or they could be trying to relate to or repair relationships that were long broken and are now coming back to. How do you do those things? And so we've got resources for every dad along the way, I'd say. And if we don't have one, then the way that I view it is that, hey, let's talk about it. And then maybe we can build a resource. I mean, over the last few years, we've just built brand new resources for whatever circumstances are coming up. So, you know, this is something dads need. So let's build something for them. So that's my response to that question. If anyone had that question at all, gentlemen, any more questions? I'll give a moment or two. I think you can hold the hands up, let the hands go down. It seems like I'm not that coordinated. But I have no other questions. Okay. If there's no other questions, I just want to say thanks so much for trusting me with something so important, your fatherhood, and for engaging with Dad Central and the resources we have. A reminder that that QR code is up there. Go ahead, scan that. Takes you right to the page if you want to jump in and join our community. We are here and open until March 8th. And then we're going to close and we start focusing on everyone who's in the community to build you up, support you, and make sure that your growth is exactly where you want to be. So thank you so much. Honored that you're here and you chose. And I wish you a wonderful rest of your evening, wherever it is you are. And you'll go back and love and take care of your families and take care of yourselves. Thank you guys. You're very welcome, gentlemen. Thank you. Love the kind words. Thanks so much, gentlemen. All right, gentlemen. Take care.